This pulled up. Okay. So my last video that I put out, we were looking at the i5 13600K and versus a 13900K. I just had the numbers. I'm just comparing the i5s, the i9, and then of course I was going to add in the i7, which we're going to do here today, and just kind of see if it makes sense to maybe just buy the i5 or go to the i9. And then in the results, we got some very interesting numbers. The i9 was significantly faster, about 20% faster. This was something that we had not seen. So let me go ahead and pull this one up. So this is from last year's numbers where I compared the 2700K and the 12600K. And as you can see here, 167 FPS on 1% lows up to 171. Basically the same, almost within margin of error. So I was like, what's going on here? We're using newer games, and I was like, well, maybe those extra cores are actually finally doing a thing. And this is one of the main things that a lot of people out there keep talking about. Cores will be used, new consoles, they have 8-core 16-thread CPUs. So I'm like, maybe that's what it is. And I was very clear in the last video, that was my thought, that that could potentially be it, but it warranted investigating. And yeah, a lot of people actually threw out, hey, why don't you just use the 13900K with the 6-core? I was like, well, didn't make a lot of sense because you can't buy, an i5 with 36 megs of cache, but for science purposes, sure, let's go ahead and check that out. So that's in here as well. And yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. So without me beating around the bush too much more, if you want to know the specs that I used and all that sort of stuff, it's in the video description, or you can watch 2 or 3 videos ago on my channel. I went in painstaking detail on what I was using. But for this one, yeah, well, let's just jump right on in and check this stuff out. So, all right, we're going to kick things off with Cyberpunk, and this one was basically a nothing burger across the board. Doesn't matter if you're using DDR5. You're GPU bound. I mean, it's, I'm just using 1440p numbers just to save a little bit of time. But yeah, we're GPU bound. This one's just a big fat nothing burger. They're all the same in this game, even with a 4090. Basically, we need a faster graphics card to test this game, even at 1440p. All right, so let's go on over to Gotham Knights. And this one, we did see the 13600K fall a little bit behind. As you can see here, actually, the 2 new ones, the 13900K with 6 cores and the 13700K, these guys are identical. They're actually pulling a little bit ahead here, which I found a little strange, matching the D5. My guess is it's just run-to-run variation, and in this game, my other suspicion is it probably just did more shader caching, as I'm using the same system. That's the only reason why I'm thinking there's any real difference here. But overall, I mean, that's not even that big of a jump. That's about a 10%. So not too big of a deal. Now, God of War is actually one of the most interesting benchmarks here. So as we can see, the 13600K is way behind, right? And then if we look at the 13700K, that comes in at 151. And then the 13900K with 6 cores at 142. So this one does fall behind a bit. And then you have these guys tied basically with the 13700K. So in this game, what's interesting is obviously the cache does make a difference, a very big difference, because you're going from 105 to 142. But cores also make a difference, as this one has more cache than this one, right? So in this particular instance, both cache and cores are at play. So yeah, that's why this one's interesting, because it's actually scaling with both. Next up is Modern Warfare 2. Once again, much like Cyberpunk, it's a nothing burger. In reality, the biggest difference that I would say that you're going to see in this game is memory latency more than anything else. All right, so Plague Tale Requiem next. This game, we do see another big jump from the 13600K. Taking a look at the 6-core 12-thread 13900K, that also falls a little bit behind, but we're talking about basically margin of error. And we do see that the 13700K is also a smidge behind. So this is another game like God of War. It does like the cache, obviously, a lot, as that gave us a massive increase, but it also does benefit from those extra cores. So this one has less cache than this one. This one has more cores than this one. So it kind of balances out. So this game kind of wants either or, and both being the preferable option for the maximum performance. Next up is Spider-Man with the ray tracings. The 13600K is a good bit behind in this one. If we take a look, we have the 13900K 6-core. It's on par with the 13900K here. The only one that stands out really is the DDR5, So that is the X factor. But these are all pretty much in line with one another. Once again, like I said, run-to-run variations between them. This is basically just the same. All right, so going on over to Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, we have the DDR, or the 13600K. That is a little bit behind. This is another one that actually scales better with the cores as well. So 8 cores with less cache does beat out 6 cores with more cache. However, the more cache does give you a huge bump up. So you guys can kind of see the trend that's starting to form here. It's not all games, obviously, but when you're GPU or CPU bound, other than Spider-Man, which just wants DDR5 and the most memory bandwidth possible, it's, yeah, you can see that cache is a big deal, and then cores are also beneficial. All right, and then we got Warhammer, or Total War Warhammer 3. This one, we got a nice little bump up. These guys are all basically the same with the DDR4. The only one that's a little bit higher is the DDR5. So cores make no difference on this game at all. Witcher 3, this is another one very similar. You got 77, gets bumped up. Cache is the king. Now, here's the thing. This has has less cache than this one. So what that means is this has 24 megabytes. This one has 30. This one has 36. So that means somewhere between 24 and 30 is the magic number. That is really what we're seeing here. And these guys are all the same. Once again, this one just wants DDR5. So this is the other game. So Spider-Man and this game want DDR5. And then Crysis Remastered. We're just going to always save Crysis for last because, you know, it's Crysis. And once again, they're all the same over here. So that, once again, is cache because otherwise this would be the same as this number. All right, so if we go through the 10 games and we average it out, so you go from 92, basically you can see all the DDR4 systems are basically the same. So that really lets you know that the extra 2 cores don't really matter that much. It does help a little bit. We saw it in a few games. It will give you a little extra performance, but not a lot. So the cache is a bigger deal, but how much cache do you need? Well, the key, at least for Intel, is between the 24 megabytes and the 25 or the 30 megabytes on the 13700K. So the 36 megabytes on the 13600K doesn't matter. You guys saw that the 13700K was keeping up with the 13900K in every benchmark. So, yeah, I found that pretty interesting. So, yeah, cores matter a little bit in some games. The cache matters a lot in most of these newer games. And like I showed you guys earlier, in last year's tests using slightly older games, the 20 megabytes of the 12600K was enough. So basically, the newer games have just raised the bar a little bit higher. And where that exactly is, who knows? We just know that it's somewhere between that 24 and 30 megabytes of the 13700K. The real takeaway here is that the 13900K is wholly unnecessary for gaming. To get the most performance out of today's games with a RTX 4090, I was about to call it a 3090, a 4090, the 13700K is going to deliver very similar performance. Now, here's the little bit of a gamble. If you want to spend a little bit more on a 13900K, perhaps in the future, those games will utilize that cache a little bit better. However, you could make the argument that 2-3 years from now, if and when that is the case, you can either buy a new system that's going to be way faster anyway, or you can just upgrade to a 13900K for a couple of bucks because they'll be significantly cheaper. So, yeah, there's 2 different ways to look at it. And then this also brings up the question of what about the AMD X3D chips? They have tons of cache. Well, as we've shown here, Intel CPUs and AMD CPUs need cache for different reasons, and they're going to need different amounts of cache. Intel has very low latency on the memory, so it can fetch data from memory a lot quicker than AMD can, so it's not going to need anywhere near as much cache. As we've just seen, somewhere between 24 and 30 is the magic number on today's games. Now, like I said, we just don't know where the AMD lies because all you can really get is a 32 and then a 96. There's nothing in between. And we know that it really, really likes the 96. However, I'm going to go ahead and get my hands on another 5800X3D, as these new games clearly do like more cache, and see if it will actually favor better compared to Alder Lake, Raptor Lake CPUs, where I found last year that even a 12600K was beating out the 5800X3D. Nowadays, with the cache mattering more, that seems unlikely. I have a feeling it'll probably be closer to something like the 12700K when fully tuned. But yeah, I'm pretty interested in that one. And of course, I do want to see if there's going to be a big gap between the 7800X3D and the 5800X3D. If there is, cool. We might have to recommend the 7800X3D, but in my opinion, I still think I'm going to be recommending anybody who has an AM4 motherboard, just get a 5800X3D and just don't worry about it. Save a crap ton of money and go that route. But we'll see, because that's coming out next month. And yeah, so I'm super excited about that. And for all you guys watching live, you know, that's where the super chats are going. That's where all of the memberships and all that sort of stuff. It's to get all this stuff so we can do the test, so we can actually know what's going on. Now, like a lot of people were telling me, yeah, cache is the thing, but nobody would actually give me real data on this. So I'm like, okay, you're guessing. It was one of two things. It was either cache or cores. It's like, well, be specific. Now we know on the Intel platform where the cache limit is, or at least we have a decent range. We know that the 13900K's extra cache really isn't being utilized. Not yet, anyway. The extra cores don't matter. They're still wrong over there. All the people that are advocating for really high core count gaming. I did get a little suckered into that one, I think. There was a lot of people going, look at all this core scaling and this sort of stuff. And I was like, it looks pretty cool, and you can kind of see it. But at the end of the day, the 13900K, you know, with 33% or 25% of its cores lopped off, it performed virtually no different. There's a few games where you lost a little bit, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And scaling past 8 cores, it's pretty obvious it's going to be a very long time before that's a thing. So this is the main reason why AMD is selling a 7800X3D. You know, they're only making one X3D chiplet because there's just no point. The games just aren't going to utilize 16 cores of X3D. So they clearly know the direction where things are going. That's the main reason why Intel's stuck with 8 P cores. Personally, I'd like to see these guys come out with a 12 core, a real 12 core. So one CCD from AMD with 12 cores on it, one pool of cache, and then Intel I'd like to see also go there, as that's going to be useful for other things as well. I think that that'd be the nice balance between productivity and gaming, because you'll get more cache and other things. So if you want to talk about future-proof, until we get 12 cores, you know, just get yourself the best, cheapest 8-core you can. And I think you're going to be just fine, as usually the 8 cores have more cache. And in the future, obviously, they will be used. But if you want to get a 6-core, it's going to work just fine. You're just not going to get optimal performance, but you're going to get very playable. I mean, it's not like the 13600K can't play games, even with a 4090. You're just leaving performance on the table with that tier GPU. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little snippet from my live stream. If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell down below. And you can join me every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to be the standard time for the live streams, and then the videos will come a few days later. So you can go ahead and do that. Or if you want to see the full unedited version and help support the channel, please consider clicking the join button down below or becoming a Patreon member with the link in the video description. And if you're interested in picking any of this stuff up, you can also help support the channel by using the affiliate links down below. I want to thank you so much. That's all I have for you here today, and I will catch you guys in the next video.